Did you know so many people dislike hearing the sound of their own voice that there was a term created for it? It's called voice confrontation. You are listening to Sound Thoughts from Sound Science Soul. Why you hate hearing your own voice. Simply put, the sound you hear on a recording is different than the sound generated when you speak. But before we dive into how this works, let's recognize one key part of your ear anatomy, the cochlea, and its connection to sacred geometry, because the cochlea plays a key part here. If you aren't familiar with the term sacred geometry, in the simplest terms, it is an ancient science explaining the energy patterns that are involved in creation. It is believed that every natural pattern or growth, whether human, plant, or animal, comes back to a few geometric shapes. This connects into the idea of oneness, that we, all living things, are all connected. The nature of every form and its vibrational resonance, everything and everyone is connected. That's so beautiful. The cochlea, which we will sadly connect to this idea of hating our own voices, is the spiral organ in the middle ear that translates sound waves to the brain. The cochlea looks like a snail or a seashell, and this spiral shape is found throughout nature as well as within our own body. Not only is the cochlea spiral shaped, but within our human body, the spiral is also connected to the flow of energy through chakras, as they are thought to spin in a circle. And the spiral shape is also found in the double helix in the DNA of each cell. The spiral shape serves a purpose too, just as a snail shell is spiral for a functional reason. Snail shells protect the snail's internal organs, which are located in a visceral hump. At birth, the visceral hump turns along a lineal axis and creates a coiled snail shell. In the human ear, the spiral shape of the cochlea enhances our ability to detect low-frequency sounds. It's directly related to how our hearing works and what we can hear. Symbolically, in spirituality, the spiral is connected to the term as above, so below. The idea that the spiral spirals up to connect the physical self with the higher self and all levels in between. It's interesting that our DNA, the building blocks of our creation, are also spirals. Energy moves in spirals, and the spiral also symbolizes raising one's consciousness when evolving the soul, spiritual growth. It is the rhythm of life. The spiral represents motion and the cycle of rebirth. The idea of the spiral and its connection to our hearing and to sound is further intriguing because so many creation stories begin with the idea that we were originally spoken or even sung into existence. And possibly those vibrations created these shapes. It is also interesting to note that our sense of hearing is one of the first senses we develop, and studies have shown it is the last sense that we lose in the dying process. A dying brain has been proven to respond to sound even in an unconscious state up to the last hours of life. Are you seeing all the connections here? I hope you are. But now back to why you're hating on hearing your own voice. As explained by Neil Bott, a professor at the University of Washington, the ear's hearing is within the inner ear, and sound reaches the inner ear a few ways. What we typically hear is via air conduction. Anything causing sound creates a sound wave that is then transmitted in the air. The sound waves travel to your outer ear, through the eardrum, before reaching the middle ear, and then the cochlea, which again is that spiral organ in the middle ear that translates those sound waves to the brain. It's amazing how much of a process this really is, but how quickly and how often it is happening all day, every day. But through the air is not the only way that sounds reach your inner ear. In fact, all the bones and tissues in your head are also conducting sound waves. So when you speak, your vocal cords are creating those sound waves, and they are traveling through the air, but also those bones and tissues in your head are conducting sound waves. So the voice in your head is from both methods of transmission. The sound you hear on a recording is only that which is transmitted through air conduction, so it sounds different to you on a recording. It sounds weaker and higher pitched. Yet when you hear your voice through the conduction of bones and tissues, bone and air have very different densities, so the sound is filtered differently. You hear more of the lower frequency vibrations so that your voice sounds deeper and richer. When you hear your voice, the bone filters out some of the higher frequencies and it sounds more harmonious. It's quite a shock to hear the opposite sound, obviously. Yet this isn't the only reason you may not like hearing your voice. It is a new voice to you. And with that comes an experience of looking at self-perception and reality. The voice is a projection of yourself and an important part of your identity. You realize what other people have been hearing is different than you realized. In addition, you go through a process of evaluating your voice, similar to what you do when you hear someone else's voice. But you may even be more critical and discerning because it is yours. So whatever you pick up on, at the worst, it could be lack of confidence or weakness or even just sadness. You may become upset by this because it doesn't fit into the identity and traits that you hope to project. But it's also interesting to note that studies have shown we don't truly dislike our voice unless we know it's our own voice. In studies conducted where the listener was exposed to their voice without knowing it was their voice, they liked their voice and maybe would even rate it better than other voices. It's just a matter of being self-critical. In fact, I'm going to contradict a bit the whole idea that people dislike their voice. According to an article published in Medical News Today, research shows people use 30 to 40% of their speech communicating their experiences to others, or in other words, talking about themselves. Psychologists have identified that we feel better when we share our thoughts with others around us. And a Harvard neuroscientist has gone as far as to look at the brain function associated with talking about oneself and found that talking about oneself showed increased activation in brain regions associated with the dopamine system, or the region of the brain associated with reward and satisfaction, most often linked to food, sex, money, and other similar gratifying activities. So while you may not like hearing the recorded version of those conversations, your dopamine-driven parts of you definitely appreciate using your voice to express. And your voice is one of your greatest assets, both the inner and outer voice. It creates how you feel in your reality by the messages you express, using your voice to advocate for yourself, using your voice to speak positively about yourself and others, and using it to sing, which releases stuck energy and releases your brain's feel-good chemicals, relieving anxiety, and even acting as a natural pain reliever. Our voice has the ability to build up. It's how you express love, your feelings, the affirmations you tell yourself. It can also tear you down or others if you use your voice to speak unkindly. Depending on your beliefs, we were possibly created through sound, and yet it is our own self-hatred that keeps us from the beauty of all that is sound, including our own voices. It sounds very much like our relationship with our Creator, whatever you believe that is. Our true nature is love and harmony. But through our anger, pain, hatred, whether our own or directed at others, it is possible we create separation from our true nature, from ourselves, our highest selves, and from the source of our creation. So love that little cochlea and all it does for you, and learn to love your voice because it plays an important part in your life, whether it sounds like a sexy Barry White in reality or a squeaky Urkel on a recording. From playing radio DJ in my room as a child to becoming a music promoter / journalist / podcast host, and then to discovering the importance of sound and how to use sound to heal and sharing it with you to help you. Thank you for listening. I appreciate each and every person who listens and receives something out of this knowledge.